Let's go to the Boardwalk Honda hotline. 15 years covering the Philadelphia Eagles. You can hear him Thursday nights, Mosher, McMullen, and Cleat on 97.3 ESPN from the Landmark Americana. He joins us now to talk some Eagles and NFL. Geoff Mosher, 97.3 ESPN. Mosher, are you a red zone guy, or do you like to dive into one game and kind of get into the guts of the game?
Mike Gill, it doesn't happen often, but you and I are on the very same page. I am not a red zone guy. I don't have that kind of itch. Even though I'm a big fantasy football player, I actually like to watch a football game, even if it's somebody other than the Eagles playing, and get into the strategy and enjoy it, and not have to just be like, what's going on here and what's going on. I don't even have the NFL Network, to be honest.
I don't either. We must have the same package because I don't have the NFL Network and I don't have the red zone. And guess what? I'm the same as you. I like to sit and get invested into the game. That's right.
I mean, even the Browns on opening were fun against the Steelers, right? I mean, I wasn't turning that away. Big tie there. It was fun.
Well, and I try to explain it to the listeners because of what we do here. The Giants, the Cowboys, the Redskins games are more we talk about those games more. If I'm watching the red zone and I'm watching two AFC teams, I'm not really – they're not getting a lot of airtime here, so I'm wasting my time by watching them.
I'm with you, man. I'm definitely with you.
Although I said before you came on, I'll give you the shout-out. The night of my fantasy draft, we talked on the phone, and you said, take Patrick Mahomes, and I listened to you.
I have been telling everybody who will listen to me for a while to take Patrick Mahomes.
Man, where were you for my fantasy draft, man? Jeez, could have used that.
I'm sorry. Mike, you should have spread the word, man. You got to spread the word.
Well, we're in the same league. I can't give him my picks, so I mean,
one of my many leagues.
Geoff Mosher.
Guys, imagine taking Mitchell Trubisky and trading up for him ahead of Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. Imagine that.
Yeah, and Watson, that was a good draft class. I mean, if Trubisky turns out to be decent, and he played okay last night, Watson.
Yeah, nice.
Yes, I said okay. He played okay. He's much better when he's on the move, it seems like.
Yeah, but that's almost like what you don't. I mean, yeah, it's great to have a Carson Wentz, a guy who can make plays on the move. You don't want a guy whose best plays come on the move and can't play very well in the pocket.
Yeah. Well, Geoff Mosher's with us. By the way, you can follow Geoff at Geoff Mosher NFL to check out his Inside the Birds podcast. Also, his Patreon page, which is patreon.com. For $1.99 a month, you get all of Geoff's coverage of the Eagles, 15 years covering the team. So make sure you do that, and Geoff will be joining us. And, of course, you can hear him Thursday nights. And, Geoff, obviously the big news yesterday was Carson Wentz. And, I mean, everybody's been kind of trying to strategically figure out when is it going to be, if it is they lose, if it's when he's healthy. For me, it comes down to he was healthy, they felt comfortable with him, ready to go. So was it a surprise that he'll be playing on Sunday?
No, I don't think it's a surprise. I always figured that when he was cleared, and I did think it was going to come in the first month, I felt like when he was cleared, it would be on a Monday and that he would start practice 2 days. Because if you're going to clear him for contact and you're going to prepare for a game, then he has to take all of the first-team reps.
Yeah.
What good is it to have him cleared for contact and still running the scout team when there really is no contact? And honestly, there's no contact for a quarterback anyway, but there's no, you're just running simulated looks of the other team. So it doesn't surprise me. And here we go. I think it's obviously very exciting for Eagles fans. And I'll say with this, they've always said, and Doug said it again yesterday, that there was no timetable specifically. It was just whenever Carson Wentz passed all the medical check marks. But I don't think you can help but notice that by clearing him this week, it is I think 1 or 2 days past the 9-month mark. If they had played him against Tampa or if they had started him in preparation the Wednesday before the Tampa game, you're a few days before the 9-month mark. So it seems to me, and I'm just reading tea leaves here, that 9 months, official 9 full months, was perhaps a barometer for them that they weren't willing to come out and say, yes, it's got to be 9. But it just seems a little bit more than coincidental that it's a day after the 9-month mark that he's cleared.
Hey, Geoff, today let's look into an innocent move with Josh Adams. Seems like, innocent enough. But they promoted a running back. They now have 5. They released a receiver. They're down to 3. Read the tea leaves on that move.
Well, there's a couple of them to read there. First of all, they release a wide receiver who played 75% of their offensive snaps in the season opener, and then even against Tampa played more snaps than Dallas Goedert and a fair amount for a guy who's never played in the NFL before opening night. So that's quite interesting. I mean, he really was a significant part of their 3 wide receiver package. So, and then they call up a running back, not another wide receiver, not another deal or anything like that. So what it tells me is 2 things. One, there's probably some concern about Darren Sproles' hamstring and Jay Ajayi's back, and they need some more run weaponry to go along with Corey Clement and, Wendell Smallwood. And I also sense that maybe they're just tired of watching Wendell Smallwood, be a straight line runner. I don't know what's with your West Virginia guys, Mike. I mean, they're all like speed demons and, athletic guys in college and Holgerson system, and then they come to the NFL, and it's like, well, where did all that talent go? But anyway,
yeah,
I think that they're looking for a little more weaponry in the run game, and then I surely think now that they're down another receiver without DeAndre Carter, that you're going to see Doug make some adjustments in his formations and play more 2 tight end schemes.
They're like the West Virginia skill guys are like the Penn State running backs, right?
Oh, that's a good one. All
good
right. I mean, we
there.
do have Larry Johnson. Larry Johnson had a very good career. I'm sure I can find 1 or 2 more.
We've got Mark Bolger. He was a pretty good QB for a year or 2.
He was. I more meant the modern Dana Holgerson player. But yeah.
Oh yeah, you're right. Just got this from Josh that Jordan Matthews was just seen coming out of the NovaCare complex. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it looks like a picture of him with his, coming out. Do you even know if he's healthy enough to play? Do you think there's receivers that are on the market? Your Matthews, your Macklins. Obviously, you got the bigger names like Des Bryant, the intriguing talents like a Corey Coleman. Do you think any of them the Eagles kick the tires on?
Yeah, today is Tuesday, so it's workout day across the league. So I didn't know about the Jordan Matthews thing. That must have just kind of developed. I see Jamie Apodi tweeted that she saw it. So
yes.
Wouldn't surprise me at all. As you mentioned, the whole kicking the tires thing, if that's what's going on. It's interesting. Now you read even deeper. Let's say they were to bring in a Corey Coleman or Jordan Matthews. Those guys are, at least so far, what we know about them is that they function best in the slot. And so that, to me, would say that you're going to see Nelson Aguilar, who has been playing a lot of outside, perhaps permanently move to the outside until the Eagles get healthy at wide receiver. And it's not just Alshon Jeffrey back, right? Because even when Alshon comes back, you're still without Mac Hollins and you're still without Mike Wallace for quite a while. So if you were to sign, or if the Eagles were to sign Jordan Matthews, Corey Coleman, or just bring in someone who's more of a slot operative, then it looks like that would mean Nelson Aguilar on the outside. And I actually think Nelson's done a pretty good job when lined up on the outside in the first 2 games and has shown that he can do it.
Yeah, I just was going to follow up with the fact that does that take away of some of Nelson where he was most effective last year? I mean, he had 8 for 88 last game, very good game. He had 8 for 33 in the first game, which is not as good, but his first couple of years in the league, he was not an effective guy outside. He had a much better year being in the slot. I don't know if that's because mentally he was more mature or what, for whatever reason, but you take away some of Aguilar's effectiveness by moving him to the outside.
I think that's a story to be told. I think against Atlanta, which was a really difficult passing day for Nick Foles, very good, fast defense, Aguilar had 8 catches. I think 5 or 6 came from the outside. He only had 33 yards, but the majority of the catches, and what really impressed me with his receptions, were he had both Desmond Trufant and the other kid, Alfred. I can't remember his name. Alfred pretty much draped on him. Nelson ran some very, very physical routes, some comebacks, broke sharply. I thought he did a really nice job as an outside receiver in that game, and I thought he did the same thing again against the Buccaneers. So I think he's starting to prove to people, and this is kind of big, right, because he's coming up on contract extension time, and everybody knows that slot receivers get paid a little bit less than outside receivers. He's had a nice opportunity here to prove that when it comes down to pay him, if he continues this, that you might have to, A, look at him as a permanent outside wideout, or B, give him a little bit more than your average, top 5 slot receiver.
All right, real quick, I know, Ryan, you want to pop in here, but it looks like Jordan Matthews was at the facility today. It's starting to kind of circulating around, knows the offense, so we'll see.
Right.
I know he had an injury settlement with the Patriots. He had a severe hamstring issue there, so who knows what kind of condition he's in, but just want to inform the people listening that Jordan Matthews looks like he was at the Eagles facility today. Go ahead.
All right, yeah, Jeff, I want to ask you about, with no Sproles, 3 wide receivers currently, I mean, what's the game plan that Doug is going to prepare for this Sunday against the Eagles? Wentz coming back for the first time. I mean, this team has so many question marks with all these injuries. What's the game plan for Doug this Sunday going in?
Well, I think 2 things Doug really has to focus on and probably will. One, I think he definitely has to get the running game going, whether it's Nick Foles, whether it's Carson Wentz. One of their strengths last year was either getting LeGarrette Blount in there and then Blount and Ajayi. There were times last year, even with Wentz as the quarterback, say like Dallas, remember at Dallas, where they struggled a little bit, and then all of a sudden Doug just starts leaning on that running game, getting it going, and it just opens up everything. So, Josh Adams is up here now, and maybe Sproles will be back, but I definitely think that the running game has to be prioritized. And the Colts are the type of team that play a lot of cover too. So they're not going to bring a safety into the box unless you make them. So make them bring that safety into the box, run the ball well, and now you're looking at 1 safety deep, and you'll have some nice mismatches on the outside as long as you got some decent receivers out there. So the second thing I would say is that he has to, and I mentioned it, I think he has to get Dallas Goedert on the field more. Yeah. I really don't think that Goedert is in the doghouse. I think that Doug just really likes to spread out defenses with 3 receivers, keep them in nickel. They're very, teams are light when they're in nickel. They have an extra corner instead of an extra linebacker. And every time you see one of those signature outside zone runs where Kelsey is out in the second level and Blaine Johnson's out there, Kelsey's getting his body on a 190-pound cornerback, nickel corner, instead of a 230-pound linebacker. That's a huge advantage for the Eagles, and that's why they've run so well out of 3 wide formations all last year when they were one of the top rushing teams in the league. So Doug, I think, realizes now, though, that he can't just try to spring the running game at the expense of a terrible passing game and putting fringe receivers out there. So I really think he's got to get Goddard out there. And to my point about the whole slot, if you move Nelson to the outside and you have room in the slot, it may not just be for a slot receiver like a Jordan Matthews or a Corey Coleman. It's a good chance to put Ertz or Goddard in that position.
What are your thoughts on how he called the game this past Sunday, Jeff?
How Doug called?
Yeah, how Doug called and managed the game this past Sunday against the Bucs.
Yeah, I thought he was a little bit stubborn, as coaches tend to be, especially when you win a Super Bowl. I mean, it's clear that the passing game wasn't going great, and Vaitai wasn't blocking well, and I thought he needed to get Goddard in there a little bit more, and again, go to tight end a little bit more. But and then he put Josh Perkins in, who was a college wide receiver, and his basic point was, I still wanted to kind of have that speed and stretching of the defense where I'm playing Josh Perkins a lot, but he's almost playing slot receiver instead of tight end. I don't know. I just think that, you know what, you're beating your head against the wall or you're cutting off your nose sometimes to spite your face. I would have liked to have just seen, from an offensive standpoint, a little bit more, well, obviously less penalties too. That killed him in the first half. I don't know if that's his fault. But from a play calling standpoint, I think he was just really slow to get out of these 3 wide receiver formations that just weren't working.
Hey, Jeff, what do you think about the way they use Corey Clement and whether or not they should expand his role? Because it seems like the role they want to use him in is it's fourth quarter, you're worn down, he hasn't ran all day, he's fresh, and he'll grind this game out for us, as opposed to, hey, this guy's pretty darn good, let's get him some touches throughout the day.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I probably should have said that with Ryan when he asked me about, Doug's calling. Why Wendell Smallwood is getting more runs in the fourth quarter than Corey Clement, I don't know. I mean, I get that it's hot, it's steamy, Clement had to do returns, but same time, you got to win a game. So why wouldn't you got to have your best player out there, and or the better player out there? And I think that it would have been better to have Corey Clement out there. He made some nice plays in the screen game, and he had a few nice runs. I've seen, when I watched the tape, I feel like there are some runs that Corey Clement could finish off better or hit the hole better, and I tend to think that that's, maybe symptomatic of the fact that he's just not getting into a rhythm or seeing the ball as much as we thought he would as a ball carrier. So that might be one of those adjustments, especially if Sproles can't play, and if Ajayi is still banged up, where Corey Clement is your main feature back going into the Colts, and you kind of get him lathered up and going early.
Geoff, I saw you retweet this out earlier, and I saw a couple stories circle around this morning, and I want your thoughts on Michael Bennett. He said, "I don't talk to media anymore." Is there anything to that? Like, is he potentially unhappy in Philly right now, or unhappy with his role? He was a little less eloquent. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, so there's either two things to that story. One, it's what you're referring, and maybe disappointed with the role. I know that there was kind of an exchange with him and Chris Wilson, the defensive line coach, during the game that some people interpreted as friction. Other people said it didn't look that bad. He got a pressure on the play and then immediately came out, and I don't think he's used to that. This is definitely a different system. He played, I think, the most defensive snaps last year for any lineman in football, and now he's a backup and rotating in. So he's got to get used to that. So there's that way of looking at it, and maybe that's his way of saying, I'm just not going to talk to you people because I don't want to say anything that's going to get me in trouble, and I'm frustrated. Or it's the other way where Chris Collinsworth, in the opening game kind of said, word out of Philadelphia is he's not happy with his role, even though he played the second most defensive line snaps out of that game. And maybe he's mad that got whatever, that Chris Collinsworth said that and people ran with it, and now people are labeling him as unhappy with his role. All I know is from my experience is in August when training camp started, I approached him. I wrote a story. I was still writing for The Score back then. And I asked him about potentially coming off the bench and if that would upset him. And he specifically told me he didn't come here to just be a guy. He came here to be the guy, and he's not used to coming off the bench. But he said he wouldn't complain about it. And then I countered. I said, you do happen to join a team that has a Super Bowl hero there in Brandon, a first-round pick in Barnett, Chris Long. It's a deep defensive line. And he said, yeah, but I've been to the Pro Bowl 3 times each of the last 3 years. So that was his way, I interpreted, telling me, I won't make a fuss about it, but I did not come here to be a backup. And maybe he is feeling that annoyance. So maybe not just being a backup, but just, again, you get a pressure and then you come right out. When your defense is still on the field, you want to be on the field. You want to be able to, like with Corey Clement, you want to be able to establish yourself and get into a rhythm, and maybe he feels he's not getting it.
Were you at Groh's presser today?
No, I was not.
All right. I don't know if you saw the transcripts but did you get the indication from him that he may not be available this weekend? Like, it seems that we talked about Adams earlier, but I'm starting to read some things that maybe insinuated that he might not be ready because he left the first half of that game, but then he came back in the game, right?
I'm sorry, which Mike Groh, right? That's who you're asking me about?
Yeah, Mike Groh's presser today.
And then who's not going to be available?
I'm seeing this. I see a tweet here from Rube, basically saying it says Mike Groh indicated there's a good chance Jay Ajayi won't be available Sunday.
Okay, I didn't hear you say Ajayi. All right. Well, I mean, look, that would explain a lot, right? Because we're all wondering why Ajayi starts the second half after it seemed like he was out, and then in the fourth quarter, Smallwood is getting the ball instead of him. So it would seem to me, my conclusion would be that Ajayi gave you everything he had. Couldn't probably give you too much more there in the fourth quarter, and now it's dicey whether he's able to play on Sunday. Hence, you have Josh Adams promoted from the practice squad.
Yeah. And then he did answer the question about Corey Clement today about playing only 30%, and would he agree that that's lower? And he says, I don't think I would agree. We've used 3 backs here in the past. I think Deuce does a great job of splitting that up. Now, they have said in the past that the play call has nothing to do with the receiver, that Deuce just picks the guy and goes out there. Do you still agree with that?
No, I don't. And I also don't even agree with the overriding philosophy that he should always only get 30% of the snaps because that's the way it's been. He was a rookie last year. You no longer have LeGarrette Blount. You lost Darren Sproles. You lost in the game Jay Ajayi to then keep Corey Clement at a 30% role because that's some kind of guideline that you have. Does that mean Corey Clement will never, ever get a chance to prove himself to be worthy of more carries and no matter what he does? That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Well, he could be the Trey Burton, that gets limited time, produces, and then when his time comes, he gets to go someplace else. And Burton, we saw, got in the end zone last night. He's had a pretty decent start in Chicago. Geoff, what are your expectations and anticipations for Carson Wentz? Do you think that they hold him back, or do you think it is Carson's back and we are going with everything that we have? We're not holding anything back.
Well, they're not in position to be like really selective and careful with Carson and lean on other elements of the offense, especially if Sproles, Ajayi, and all those receivers aren't playing, right? They kind of need Carson to be Carson, and that's going to be really interesting because Carson's not going to be playing with the same set of weapons that he was playing with last year. So from a play calling standpoint, it would not surprise me at all if Doug comes out throwing and trying to, again, soften up. They're going to play a soft cover too, try to hit passes across the middle to your tight end, Zach Ertz. It wouldn't shock me if Ertz had another big day. Wouldn't shock me if Goddard got some time. You move Nelson inside a little bit if you want to create a mismatch and do that. I don't think that they're going to sit there and, go with like two tight ends and Sam Alou in there 4 straight times and just keep running the ball. So I think the big question, though, is how much rust does Carson Wentz have? Most people come back from an ACL injury, and they're, it takes a little bit of rust to knock off. Adrian Pederson came back from an ACL injury and had like the greatest year anybody's ever had. So Carson kind of falls into this category of what we all say is like a superhuman athlete, an unbelievable worker, and I don't think it would surprise anybody if he just looked like an MVP again in his first start. At the same time, I think you have to be realistic and expect that it's a new team, injured weapons, first start. It wouldn't surprise me if it wasn't like, vintage Carson Wentz.
We bring it up a lot. Tom Brady's worst year was that year after the ACL. I mean, he wasn't awful, but he just wasn't Tom Brady.
He was human.
Yes, he was. Geoff Mosher at Geoff Mosher NFL. Listen to his Inside the Birds podcast with Billy Osborne and Adam Kaplan, and also patreon.com, patreon.com. Geoff Mosher, you can find him on Twitter, and you can subscribe to his content on the Eagles for just $1.99 a month. You can get it all, his All-22, 15 years covering the Philadelphia Eagles, and don't forget, Thursday night, Mosher, McMullen, and Krause from the Landmark Americana. It sounded like you had a raucous crowd out there last week. We'll see what Week 3 brings, as Geoff will be a part of that. Thursday night from 6 to 8 here on 97.3 ESPN. Geoff, we look forward to talking to you, man.
Yeah, me too, man. Thanks for having me on, guys.